and good morning to you. Representatives of regional agencies, the CARICOM Energy Unit, the Caribbean Center for Renewable Energy and Energy Efficiency, Finance Manager CrossQ, Mr. Mohan Nandwani, and directors within CrossQ Network. Speakers, Mr. Fulgence Sampry, Ms. Sherry-Ann Farquharson, representatives of the international and national organizations, representatives of quality institutions across our region, representatives of the private sector and businesses within the private sector, especially those in the energy sphere who are with us this morning, media personnel present, ladies and gentlemen, good morning. I am Latoya Burnham, the Technical Officer for Quality Promotions with the CARICOM Regional Organization for Standards and Quality, more commonly called CrossQ. Thank you for being with us this morning and showing a keen interest in the work we are doing in the interest of a more sustainable region. To kick things off this morning will be brief remarks on behalf of CrossQ and its partners, and that will be delivered by Mr. Mohan Nandwani, our Manager of Finance at CrossQ. Mohan?
Good morning, everybody, and let me just say it's a pleasure to be here. My name is Mohan Nandwani, Finance and Operations Manager at the CrossQ. And first of all, normally you would see Mr. Derek Omar, the CEO, making these remarks, but unfortunately he's unable to do so. But I am very pleased to do so on his behalf. And then apologies again for any noise that you may hear in the background. I'm working from home today, and there are some people doing some work next door. So if you hear any hammering or sawing or banging, you know what it is. So I won't keep you up too much. They've given me a time limit to make my presentation, so I shall make it short and brief. So good morning again, representatives of the CARICOM Energy Unit, representatives of the Caribbean Center for Renewable Energy and Energy Efficiency, directors and colleagues within the CrossQ network, heads of organizations, heads of private sector agencies and businesses, panelists, media personnel present, ladies and gentlemen, good morning again to you all. This morning's opening remarks will be brief as I promised you, and I'm sure that you are anxious to get to the meat of the matter here today and hear what CrossQ is doing about the SICRI what CrossQ is doing and how the SICRI is supporting our region's development in the energy sector. So I'll start with a brief quote by renowned author Jeff Goodall. Some while ago, he was recorded as saying that studies show that investments to spur renewable energy and boost energy efficiency generate far more jobs than oil and coal. Now, that's a very provocative statement, I have to say. But it's not a particularly inspirational quote to start the day, but it does generate some food for thought, as I alluded to, about what is possible with the development of alternative energy sources and ways of sustainably utilizing energy, particularly for fossil fuel dependent countries like those in our region. Caribbean countries, according to media sources, consume about 25% more energy than they supply. The same media sources also cited that nearly 81% of that energy supply was from fossil fuel products. With the volatility of the oil markets and its prices, the only way to control spending will be to find avenues away from fossil fuels that can serve as viable alternatives. In many cases, that's what the region has been trying to do for the last decade or so. For us, here at the CrossQ, the Trust for Alternatives is as much about energy as it is about climate change and our collective vulnerabilities where that is concerned. In more recent years, we've heard statements from Dominica that its rebuilding efforts will definitely involve renewable energy alternatives. Barbados has also announced an ambitious plan for 100% renewable energy by 2030, which I agree is quite ambitious. We're hearing talk from Trinidad and Tobago that is committed to reducing CO2 emissions by 15% by 2030, with ambitions to have at least 10% renewable energy by 2021. Jamaica, I understand, is also looking at 50% transition to renewable energy by 2030. And across the region, you see these types of commitments and ambitious plans. In addition to the several countries that have been advancing energy efficiency initiatives and that are currently in the process of adopting regional energy efficiency labeling standards and the CARICOM regional energy efficiency building codes, while at the same time putting measures in place for electric and hybrid vehicles, it's commonly known that the first step to achieving net zero pathways, especially to gain public participation, is to put in place energy efficiency measures while developing clean alternate sources for energy generation and consumption. And this is where the CrossQ comes in. The reason we mention these commitments and initiatives is because the one thing we want to ensure as we look to introduce our energy efficiency and renewable energy initiatives is that we are building platforms based on quality and on standards criteria. Otherwise, we might as well be tossing good money down the drain. And we all know the importance of quality, even without knowing the specifics of it. You know, our mothers and fathers always taught us to do the right thing and to put our best foot forward. And if we have quality, then we can't go wrong. At the CrossQ, we are committed to our mandate of facilitating trade and competitiveness of our region's goods and services throughout the implementation and promotion of quality. And we can do no less for this vital energy sector. CrossQ is the umbrella organization comprising the 15 national standards bodies of CARICOM working together to develop a region of quality. In this vein, we recognize that as the region truly looks to ensure that not only are we building better and more resiliently, but that we are spending wisely on energy, and that a focus and insistence on quality parameters could put our region in a prime position. Through this thinking, we can generate growth in our economies, free up funds normally spent on imported fuels to truly invest in areas that truly need it, and create jobs in both the energy sector and in quality infrastructure services that will be able to monitor, advise, and keep us on track to spending wisely. Today's session is the fourth in a series of 10 hosted by the CrossQ under the Regional Quality Infrastructure component of the TAPSET project, Technical Assistance for Sustainable Energy in the Caribbean. The TAPSET project is an initiative funded by the EU, European Union, and the German government with a mission to ensure that modern, clean, and reliable energy supplies are accessible to all CARIFORUM citizens at affordable and stable prices. In some of these sessions, we partner with other agencies like the Caribbean Center for Renewable Energy and Energy Efficiency, CCRE, to twin our expertise in quality with theirs in energy and thereby deliver to you a complete package that can address the issues and engage you in dialogue to sensitize, educate, and hopefully encourage you to action in your own spheres of influence. I promise that the remarks were not going to be long this morning. And so let me end here by thanking the TAPSEC for supporting such initiatives to bring awareness to our energy and quality infrastructure stakeholders, and also to CCRE for once again joining us to bring more information to you. Enjoy today's session and feel free to engage the panel in dialogue that will enlighten you further. Good day and thank you all, and thank you LaToya, and thank you to the team at the CrossQ for arranging this wonderful occasion. Thank you very much, everybody.
And thanks to you as well, Mohan, for those introductory remarks. Today's session, or at least my part of today's session, will actually take a different form to what you're probably used to from regional organizations or businesses in general. Instead, I want to relate a story I came across actually after encountering the quote Mr. Nandwani began with this morning. Renowned journalist and author Jeff Goodall was kind of a jack of all trades, having had a career that spanned from janitor to bartender to blackjack dealer and technical writer of Russian journals, just to name a few. His journalism career began as a writer of politics and economics, but just after the turn of the 21st century, he actually began to write about energy, beginning with the situation of coal in the US. His writings earned him much acclaim and book deals, which earned him further acclaim. But his quote about the investments in renewable energy and to boost energy efficiency spoke to me because of the potential to generate jobs. Coming out of the pandemic, we're hearing a lot about regional economies taking a serious look at what they spend on fossil fuel generated energy. And there's been a renewed thrust to RE and EE as potential solutions for our region. That will be our jump off point today. Jeff Goodall's belief in the ability of new thinking about energy to not just point the way to clean air and better climate for our Earth, especially our region, but the untapped potential that's waiting for us to wake up and decide what to do with it. One of the possible answers for what we can do with it is just what CrossQ and CCRE will discuss today, which is to explore energy in ways that are sustainable and where there are standards for what is acceptable. The only thing to get this ball rolling will be for us to do better, for us to have the will to do better than we've done before, because our doing better will mean cleaner air, more sustainable energy for current generations and those to come. Why should we leave a broken earth for other generations to fix? CrossQ was given its mandate to introduce quality parameters where there were either none or very few which were harmonized across the region. Yes, individual producers would have had systems to which they adhere, but what we are trying to do really is to bring everyone along, to educate everyone to the possibilities that exist, and then discuss how we actually make this work. Our first presenter this morning will be Mr. Fulgence Sampry, CrossQ's Technical Officer for Standards and Technical Regulations. Mr. Sampry is a graduate of the College of Arts, Science and Technology of Jamaica, now known as the University of Technology, UTEC, where he qualified in structural engineering and construction management. Prior to joining CrossQ, he served as the Superintendent of Works with the St. Lucia Air and Seaports Authority with responsibility for the maintenance of southern plants, namely the Hewanora International Airport and Vieux-Fort Seaports. At CrossQ, Mr. Sampry coordinates the development and harmonization of CARICOM regional standards. He's no stranger to standardization and its related activities, having spent 7 years as a standards officer with the St. Lucia Bureau of Standards, which taught him all aspects of standardization and quality infrastructure. He has extensive training in various aspects of standardization, including conformity assessment from the International Organization for Standardization and the Bureau of Indian Standards. He consistently offers his expertise to industry stakeholders by providing the necessary training through workshops organized by various national standards bodies on technical barriers to trade issues and standards implementation for increased market share, market access, and safety. Mr. Sampry will now delve into the background of CrossQ's work in energy, specifically the why, the what, the how. Fulgence, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Latoya, and thanks to CrossQ for giving me the opportunity to make this presentation this morning. As you know that as Mr. Nanwandi would have indicated that we have a limited time, to make our presentation, so I will get right into it. My purpose here is to give you a short background of CrossQ, right? Where we're coming from, basically our mandate, yeah? And what are we doing within the energy sector? All right, so CrossQ really is the network of the 15 National Standards Bureaus, NSBs, of the various member states. Our secretariat is based in Barbados, all right? We were established in the year 2002 under Article 67 of the revised Treaty of Chaguaramas. What is our ways or dates? We are really established to develop or harmonize regional quality infrastructure to facilitate trade facilitation, for enhanced efficiency to the production and delivery of goods and services, to improve quality of goods and services traded within the community and referred states, and for consumer and environmental protection. Next slide, please. I spoke of quality infrastructure. What is quality infrastructure? In a nutshell, quality infrastructure is the framework established, right, for the implementation, really, of standardization with its associated or related activities. And if we just focus on the diagram, we speak of standardization, which really is standards development and technical regulations. Then we have metrology, the science of measurement, which includes scientific, industrial, and legal. We have conformity assessment. Conformity assessment includes inspection, testing, and certification. When you talk about inspection, we're talking about inspection of documents. We look at, it's also a visual inspection. Then there's performance and market surveillance. Testing, as you know, we talk about laboratory services, and certification, we talk about certification of human, right? Certification of systems and processes. And to underpin all of that, we have quality promotions. Now, quality promotions is a pillar or a thread that CrossQ would have added. And I must say that it has taken root throughout the international community, that where we look at marketing and communications, information, knowledge management, and education, because we believe in all of that, all the pillars that we would have mentioned in quality infrastructure. Without quality promotion, really, you cannot get the message out there. And of course, all of that is underpinned by accreditation, right? In terms of conformity assessment, metrology, and standardization being underpinned by accreditation. Next slide, please. Right. So we're looking at where we're coming from. What is our role in this whole quality infrastructure development to support energy, right? We do have commitments under international agreements and policies. Then we have national and regional agendas coming out of that, right? And we, as a result, we would have developed an energy roadmap for the development of quality infrastructure. Next slide, please. Right, so it would have started with the Kyoto Protocol, right? It would have started with the Kyoto Protocol, which was developed somewhere in 1999, I believe, right? Where climate change, there was call for climate action to protect the climate, right? That protocol actually came into force in 2005. However, as time evolved, there was need for further action, right? And further commitment by member states. And so we got the Paris Agreement, which was signed and developed in Paris. That's where the name Paris comes from, in 2015, where the member states committed to reducing the carbon footprint even further, right? And that to be able to achieve whatever targets that were set at that convention, COP21, for 2030. Along the way, you had the development of the UN Sustainable Development Goals. And so energy is so critical to meeting those UN development goals. We look at Development Goal 7, which deals with clean energy, clean and affordable energy, right? We look at Development Goal 9. We look at Development Goal 11. We look at Development Goal 13, and we look at Development Goal, they're basically 13. All of these development goals includes aspects of energy, right? And affordable and clean energy and sustainable energy, right? So you realize that having sustainable energy really contributes to we meeting our development, our sustainable development goal. So when we look at our CrossQ, right, being a regional organization, we get our mandate, right, from the regional energy policy when as it comes to policy, so as it comes to energy. So the CARICOM Secretariat Energy Unit would have developed a policy. The development started in 2007, right? And as you know, policy, how these things go, it was finally approved at the 41st meeting of the COTED in Trinidad and Tobago in 2013. Out of that, you found that the energy unit would have developed a strategy. They call it the Caribbean Sustainable Energy Roadmap and Strategy, CSUMS, to implement aspects of the policy. So from that, you would have CrossQ getting its mandate, right, to develop quality infrastructure to support energy initiatives. And at the national level, you would have the National Bureaus of Standards doing the same. If we look at some extracts, right, from the CARICOM Energy Policy, where member states need to establish a regional collaboration mechanism with organizations such as CrossQ, and that is done for creation and implementation of standards, which include energy labeling, consuming equipment, electrical appliances, and vehicles, and adopt and enforce these. To develop such strategies at a national level, establishment and enforcement of labeling standards and product standards for the importation of electrical appliances, as well as standards for vehicles importation, set minimum efficiency standards that require electric utility and electricity producers to be decommission inefficient generating equipment and conduct demand side management programs, establish a regional collaboration mechanism with organizations such as CrossQ, of course, like ourselves, for the creation and implementation of standards and labeling for energy, consuming equipment, electrical appliances, and vehicles, and adopt and enforce these strategies at the national level. Now, CrossQ, the organization, right, along with member states, will identify those specifications for petroleum. Could you return to the slide? Yeah, thanks. Right, so identify specifications of petroleum products and can be standardized. So we also adopt such standards that include product quality, performance, health and safety, and environmental protection. We also develop, along with member states, develop and implement regulation to give legal force to standards. Yeah, and the list goes on. Next slide, please. So I would have indicated that we located in Barbados, and we would have developed a roadmap based on the energy efficiency, the energy policy developed by the CrossQ, the CARICOM Secretariat Energy Unit. Next slide. Roadmap, right? What have we done thus far in terms of quality infrastructure to support the energy agenda, right? Our first thing was the development of a regional energy efficiency billing code, which I believe most of you are familiar with. If not, I'm hoping that you are, right? As after today, you should get familiar with that document. That was developed on the project supported by the German ministry. And that was in March 2017 and completed in March 2018. I must say, however, that there were certain activities that were conducted prior to actually developing the energy efficiency billing code, such as we would have come up with a project to determine minimum energy performance standards for buildings in the region. All right, an exercise that proved kind of difficult because of the various classifications of buildings in the various member states, right? However, we had a basis to start off with our energy efficiency billing code. And we also looked, so it was not a situation where we decided right away we would adapt a particular billing code. So we did a consultancy to identify, right, all the billing codes that were available to us and see which one is best suited for adaptation by the region. And we decided to adapt the International Energy Efficiency and the International Energy Conservation Code, right? Then we developed marketing and promotions for an implementation plan, right? So basically a communication plan, so that after we would have completed the CARICOM Regional Energy Efficiency Billing Code, we would be able to implement and give member states a plan for implementation and also for marketing, right? The implementation of that, right? And then we also had the strengthening of the regional quality infrastructure for renewable energy and energy efficiency, the R3E, where we would have looked at various appliances, develop standards for these appliances with the focus in mind of developing an energy efficiency labeling scheme, right? We also decided that we would delve into the renewable energy area and develop standards for some renewable energy equipment, such as solar water heaters and PV systems. Okay. To date, like I would have indicated, our focus in energy was mandated at the 41st special meeting of Quoted Energy held in Trinidad and Tobago 2013. Next slide, please. Just a little about the CREBC, right? I would have indicated is an adaptation of the IECC, International Energy Conservation Code, 2018 version, right? That document is published by the ICC, and it is out of that we would have developed two other associated documents. One is the Energy Code Essential, and the other one is the Energy Efficiency Study Companion. These were developed as a result of an intervention where we did training of the CREBC under the TAPSEC project, right? That is the project that we're doing those webinars on, right? The technique, we provided training to professionals in the energy sector as well as potential inspectors, right? So that when you submit your plans, those persons would be the ones to assess your plans as to the compliance towards the code. Next slide, please. Next slide. So if we look at our standards, right? And we look at the R3E, I would have mentioned that we would have first started with standards development, right? And some promotional activities, okay? We then source another program, right? To look at implementation, a pilot of that labeling scheme, right? In that pilot, we looked at the setting up of testing centers, right? So we do have, based on the capacity of the member state, we do have a testing center of excellence for air conditioners and refrigerators, and that is located in Jamaica. So we assist them in the development of capacity to be able to provide the various testing, right? We also have under that project a regional database which would include all refrigerators being tested, whether it be regionally, also to be able to tap in other other databases where you would have information and testing on various other products, other models. We also have the setting of labels, right? Energy efficiency labels that would be issued by the member states. And let me just indicate that the pilot is happening in Jamaica, St. Lucia, Belize, and Trinidad and Tobago is providing a center of excellence for testing in lighting equipment. So they have the laboratory for lighting equipment. And so the intention is that they will provide the testing facility for lighting, okay, for regional lighting. At the national level, what happens is that you would have, as you could see, a BIMAT, right? So there you have the appliances being displayed. Someone goes, you see the appliances, they read the label and figure out that is the most efficient appliance for them to purchase based on the label, because the label would indicate it moves from, as you can see, it's color coded, and you have A, B, C, D, E, right? E being the less efficient, A being the most efficient. And so they could make a determination, right? That is the better appliance to purchase, to put in the building. And having constructed the building, their home or their building, because it's not just residential, it's also commercial, they then would put in these energy efficient appliances in their home, making their home totally energy efficient, because the code does call for the use of energy efficiency equipment. The NSBs then would have the responsibility for conformity assessment in terms of monitoring, verification, and enforcement. Also, the centers of excellence would have the responsibility for testing, right? So you have inspection, which we would have mentioned before. You would have testing, and in some cases, you would have equipment coming already certified by recognized bodies. Okay, so you see where we, as a regional organization, develop the quality infrastructure to be used at the national level. So implementation really is at the national level. We at CrossQ, we don't necessarily deliver implementation. We might assist where we can, like building the capacity in the various institutions, in the various metrology institutions, in the various NSBs, and in various conformity assessment bodies, right? We provide capacity building in that regard. Next slide, please. So we also, I would have mentioned, also delve in the development of standards in renewable energies. And one such standard we would have done is for solar water heaters. This standard will actually be going out for voting. The committee would have decided to adopt an ICC document for solar water heaters, and as such, with a Caribbean application document was developed, and it will be circulated pretty soon, maybe by as early as Monday, for member states to vote on. And I'm asking you all to show an interest in that, because the member states, the NSBs, usually post those standards on their websites. So please look out for them so that you could get yourself acquainted and see what are the requirements. You invest your money, and Latoya would have spoken about investments in energy. And so when you invest in energy, you're looking for returns, right? You want to ensure that whatever you purchase is up to standard, that whatever you purchase is doing what it's supposed to do and within a particular lifespan. The next area we'll be looking at is the solar photovoltaic standards. We have already approved the project to go ahead in terms of starting the development of that standard. It's just that our work program at this point in time is kind of crowded. So we need to be able to take off a few standards of that work program, because we do develop our standards through the National Standards Bureaus, right? And they also have their own national agenda, right? And so it sometimes becomes a little difficult for us to be able to do all the standards that are required, in a particular area. So we need to be able to balance off, prioritize our standards development. So pretty soon you will be seeing a draft standard out. More than likely, it might be an international standard, right? Because we also the intention basically is to look to international standards, adoption of international standards, you know, in terms of adoption of regional standards. Okay. We also looking at, when we look at our roadmap, we also have standards for fuels. So we also looking at clean fuels. So we have standards. We want to adopt standards for fuels, develop standards for fuels, as well as electrical mobility, e-vehicles. We're going to be looking at other small appliances like motors, fans, right, and pumps. You do get quite a bit of inefficient appliances in these areas, right? So we're looking at energy efficiency standards for these down the road. However, I must indicate that our standards development, right? In fact, our quality infrastructure development is stakeholder driven, right? And so we do not just teach. So we might have, like I said, a roadmap. However, the implementation of the roadmap is dependent upon member states' demand. And member states' demand is dependent upon the stakeholders' demand. All right. So at the national level, you get the demand for it, and the member states make the request from us to be able to develop the necessary quality infrastructure associated with that demand. We also then look for projects, right? Resource projects. We have a resource mobilization officer who goes out there and sends in proposals for us to be able to implement the development of whatever quality infrastructure, right, that is required by the member states. And hence the reason why I would have spoken about the CREBC development, the code development. It was done through a GIZ RITA project, right? The R3E project was it was financed by the German government Metrology Institute, PTB. Okay, we're now doing the TAPSEC again, right? It is funded under the 11th EDF, right? And GIZ are the project managers in that regard. So that's how we operate in terms of developing the quality infrastructure to support energy initiatives. Of course, we also act as the quality infrastructure hub for the CCRI. Latoya would have mentioned our partnership with CCRI, and that is how we support CCRI, which have the actual role for development of energy resources, clean energy resources, implementation of clean energy resources within the Caribbean based on the energy policy. Okay, so in a nutshell, basically, that is it. Thank you. Any questions? Oh, I'll be taking questions afterwards. Sorry,
no problem. We'll take questions afterwards.
Okay.
But as usual, Fulgence, thank you very much for the presentation, because you delved into quite a few areas of what CrossQ is doing and what could potentially be coming. So I would actually like for our audience to, if you have any burning questions based on Fulgence's presentation, you can start putting those into the Q&A button at the bottom of your Zoom screen. You'll see a button for questions and answers. If you have burning questions, you can drop those in there, and we will get to your questions as we go along. The important thing about the thrust that the CARICOM region is on in relation to energy is that we actually need more people on board. And one of the ways to do that is to engage them, like we're doing here today, to engage you about what is happening and to be able to discuss and find solutions and ways to address some of the issues that we recognize that we are facing. And then to bring others along on the journey to make sure that at the end of the day, we are all on the same page. As you formulate your questions, we have some able personnel in the background. I'd just like to take a minute to acknowledge Ms. Janice Hillier, who, as Fulgence would have mentioned, is our Resource Mobilization Officer. She's actually the person who manages CrossQ's energy portfolio, and she goes out and she finds the resources when the member states actually indicate their interests or indicate their need for resources in particular areas. She goes out and she finds the funding and the projects to do so. Behind her are also Jill Brown, her assistant under the TAPSEC project, and Miss Deka Straker, who is our TAPSEC intern. And together we form an energy team, which is kind of new, but at the same time, we recognize the need for what CrossQ is doing in terms of making sure that there are quality parameters within the energy sphere. Before we take your questions, however, I'd like to introduce first our second speaker, Ms. Sherry-Ann Farquharson of the Caribbean Center for Renewable Energy and Energy Efficiency, more commonly called CCRE. She's CCRE's knowledge management and capacity building expert. In this role, she fuses her passion for the emergence of a Caribbean powered by a blue and green economy with the opportunity to actually inspire the next generation of sustainability professionals through initiatives such as the CCRE Internship Program and the development of the CARICOM Energy Knowledge Hub. And if you haven't seen it, you can go over to CCRE's website as well to look at the information they're actually compiling within the Knowledge Hub. Ms. Farquharson obtained a Master of Philosophy degree in physics from the University of the West Indies, Mona Campus, having previously received a Bachelor of Science degree in electronics and physics from the same institution. Her research interests include renewable energy, sustainable transportation, and climate change, which has boded well for her during her many research and commercial projects. She is a certified energy manager and has completed training and certification in solar PV installation. Ms. Farquharson is a member of the Jamaica Society for Energy Engineers and the Council for Women in Energy and Environmental Leadership. Sherry-Ann, the session is now yours.
Thank you very much, Latoya, and good morning, colleagues. I will not go through all the protocols again, but I am happy to share with you benefits of quality infrastructure in energy. Some of the background context had been covered by Mr. Nadwani and by Mr. Sompri, but I'll share just a short video highlighting just how much we have surrounded ourselves with fossil fuel appliances, vehicles. And this video I'm sharing is from the Post Carbon Institute, just to give an idea of where we are today.
It's amazing how far we've come in 200 years, just 3 human lifetimes, from the beginning of industrialism till now. But where are we headed? We can't keep doubling human population. We can't keep dumping carbon in the atmosphere. We can't keep ruining topsoil. We can't keep growing population and consumption or basing our economy on depleting fossil fuels. We can't just print more money to solve the debt crisis. It's been an exhilarating ride, but there are limits. Now, it's not the end of the world, but we have to do 4 things fast. Learn to live without fossil fuels, adapt to the end of economic growth as we've known it, support 7 billion humans and stabilize population at a sustainable level, and deal with our legacy of environmental destruction. In short, we have to live within nature's budget of renewable resources at rates of natural replenishment. Can we do it? We have no choice. Alternative energy sources are important, but none can fully replace fossil fuels in the time we have. Also, we've designed and built our infrastructure for transport, electricity, and farming to suit oil, coal, and gas. Changing to different energy sources will require us to redesign cities, manufacturing processes, healthcare, and more. We'll also have to rethink some of our cultural values. None of our global problems can be tackled in isolation, and many cannot be fully solved. We have to prepare for business as unusual. Our best goal is resilience, the ability to absorb shocks and keep going. If we do nothing, we still get to a post-carbon future, but it will be bleak. However, if we plan the transition, we can have a world that supports robust communities of healthy, creative people and ecosystems with millions of other species. One way or the other, we're in for the ride of a lifetime. Understand the issues and pitch in. It's all hands on deck.
And so what are the plans for the region as we make this transition? Mr. Sampri mentioned the CARICOM energy policy and the CARICOM sustainable energy roadmap and strategy that has come out of that. Where are we today? The columns at the front, those blue bars, show the installed percentage of renewable energy for the different CARICOM member states. And we see where we definitely have a long way to go based on the red bars, which are the national targets. And there are a few countries that are aiming for 100% renewables. And then we see the green bars, those are the regional targets. CARICOM's aim is to get to 47% renewables by 2027. And so those green bars show the contribution from each of the different member states to allow us to get to that point. And so as we see, we don't have a choice in terms of making an energy transition. Our world or climate is demanding it. And as primarily small island developing states, we have to respond. Even though our contribution to the climate crisis is not as significant as the larger economies, because of the impact that it will have on the CARICOM citizens, then we have to do our part to contribute and to lead if we must in terms of making that transition from the dependence on fossil fuels. But also our regional economies spend a significant percentage of GDP purchasing fossil fuel from other countries. And so to shore up our energy security, it is imperative that we make this transition, as well as to facilitate our energy independence. We do have indigenous sources of energy, wind, solar, hydropower, and or oceans. The blue economy is there for the taking. And so to shore up our energy independence, it is imperative that we use more of our indigenous resources. So that's the plan, but how do we get there? We must build confidence in the energy transition. To effectively facilitate this move from this high percentage of fossil fuel to cleaner energy, we must ensure that the people of the region have confidence in the technologies that are proposed. It is one thing to make these plans, put these policies in place, but if we do not have the buy-in of the citizens of the region, then the transition will be made that much more difficult. And so we have to ensure that the technologies being proposed are fit for purpose. So we have a lifestyle based on our fossil fuels, and we have to ensure that as we suggest and instruct persons that this is better, that what we are proposing for them to use will actually serve their purposes. We also have to ensure that the alternative technologies are reliable. We have to ensure also that persons get the return on their investment. A lot of the renewable technologies have a high upfront cost, and so we have to be sure that citizens who purchase and buy into these technologies, that they do get the return on their investment, and that the expected output from these different technologies is realized. And we also have to keep people safe while we're doing this. And so to ensure that all of this is happening, the institutional framework that establishes and implements standardization to ensure that the resources being deployed fulfill the expected requirements is required. That is, the quality infrastructure is required. And I'll share an experience of being in a community where all of the houses were built with a solar water heater. And there was actually an issue with the tanks for those solar water heaters. And so a number of them failed and were not maintaining temperature. And what we found happening is not that persons would say that this particular set of solar water heaters were not working. They would say that solar water heaters don't work. And so we have to ensure that the quality infrastructure is in place, so we do not have that sort of a narrative where persons think that the technologies cannot replace well the fossil fuel technologies that they're used to. When we think about projects, and there are a number of projects that would have to be put in place to allow us to make this transition. And the CCRI has adopted from the National Renewable Energy Laboratory, NREL, a project development framework called STRUCTIC. And this highlights the different steps in project development: site selection, resource selection, ensuring that there's an off-taker for the resource, permits, the chosen technology is accurate, that you have a good team in place, you have the capital, and then you can move on to construction. Now, as you look at the graph where it shows you the unknowns, and as you reduce the number of unknowns, you eventually get to the point of reducing your risk. Now, quality infrastructure should not be one of those risks that we have to manage. And so working with CrossQ to ensure that the quality infrastructure is in place for the different segments of the energy system is important, so that when you're doing your site selection and you need to do your wind and solar measurements, the metrology, the quality infrastructure for metrology is there. When you are looking at selecting your technology, the quality infrastructure for the various technologies is there. When you're looking at selecting your team, the CCRI is a part of our mandate is to ensure that the training and the certification standards for the region are there, so that you can, when you hire persons who have been trained, you know, and you can respect the training that they have, and you can depend on what they will deliver. And so quality infrastructure is definitely important when you're looking at your renewable energy and your energy efficiency projects. And quality infrastructure for buildings. And I won't spend too much time on this, because Mr. Sampri did mention the Regional Energy Efficiency Building Code, but it definitely is important that while we look to have comfortable living spaces, that there are standards in place to ensure that persons know what to do, how to do it, and what the expectations are. But I will share a short video that the CCRI has developed, just giving a synopsis of the Regional Energy Efficiency Building Code.
The CARICOM Regional Energy Efficiency Building Code was developed to help property developers increase the energy efficiency and the upgradability of their building projects. Energy savings help offset the potential higher cost of building your home to code. And enhanced upgradability helps commercial owners increase their competitive advantage, saving money over time. Additionally, lower energy demands during and after the building process can also lead to community and national level benefits like reduced reliance on fossil fuel generated electricity across the construction industry and in homes, lower national fuel import bills, which can free up funding for other critical areas of investment, and fewer greenhouse gas emissions. So do the maths, play the long game, and help build towards a better future today. For more information on the CARICOM Regional Energy Efficiency Building Code, visit energy.crosq.org.
All right, so the final set of standards that I will look at this morning that were also mentioned are the quality infrastructure for appliances, and not just appliances, but for equipment as well. And the development of the energy label for the region was highlighted. Now, we've seen Energy Star and Energy Guide and other appliance standards, but regional standards will ensure that the appliances work as expected within our climate and within our electricity grids. And so the performance standards that are being developed and the testing labs that are being set up for lighting in Trinidad and Tobago and for refrigeration and air conditioning in Jamaica, these go back to building confidence for the consumer, so that you purchase the equipment, you know what it will do, and you can continue to to support the region as we look to make this energy transition. And another example I'll share, when the University of the West Indies was changing out their lighting infrastructure, and they were moving away from incandescent lighting to fluorescent and LED lighting. And it was observed that in the library, the LEDs that they had chosen were causing persons to feel dizzy. And we were able to, at that point, go do the tests, make the measurements, and recognize that there was a flicker that was there with that particular LED. And so that could not be used in a space for lighting. And so we could make that adjustment. However, we had to then convince persons that it's not an issue with LEDs, it's an issue with this LED. And so having the standards and the testing infrastructure in place before such products would have gone onto the market would definitely help to ensure that persons understand and have that confidence. So for instance, people are confident that if they buy a petroleum fueled vehicle, it will work. If they have an issue with the vehicle, say 3 months after purchasing, they don't return it and say, I don't want any more petroleum fueled vehicles. They would return it and say, this vehicle needs to be repaired, because they already have confidence that this technology works. And so that's what we need within the energy sector as we make this transition to alternative and cleaner technologies. We need to ensure that the quality infrastructure is in place so persons can have that same confidence in the alternative fuels, in the alternative equipment, in the lighting equipment, in the cleaner and more efficient air conditioning and everything that we're suggesting for them to use for the benefit of the region. But at the end of the day, we have to do it well the first time, because if we don't, then we definitely will lose that buy-in, and all the policies that we have in place will not be as effective as they could be if we do not have the buy-in of the citizens. So what is the CICRI doing to ensure that we can play our part in facilitating this renewable energy transition? So we have adopted what is known as the 5P principle. The first P we look at is planning or plan. CICRI currently has engaged a number of CARICOM member states in preparing integrated resource and resilience plans. And this is to look at medium to long-term energy sector planning for the member states. And at COTED, they have mandated, that's the Council for Trade and Economic Development, that by 2023, we would have gone through an iteration of IRRP for each of the member states so that we have the plan in place. Once we have the plan in place, that is going to highlight a number of projects that would need to be implemented so that we can implement these plans. And the project preparation facility stands ready to support both private sector and public sector entities to ensure that you have the technical support and to do matchmaking if it is that you require financing. But the aim is to ensure that we increase the number of bankable projects that are coming out of the region and therefore moving from plans to projects to actual implementation. And as we go through this process, we will be garnering quite a lot of data. And so the CARICOM Energy Knowledge Hub is in place to be a repository for all of this data, as well as to facilitate a community of practice. So if you have questions about the energy sector, or if there is a project that you want to get more information about, you can come to the CARICOM Energy Knowledge Hub, the CEKH, to get that information. And it's all the CEKH, all of that data also will help to inform policy so that we are putting together policies that are appropriate and the regulations will be appropriately placed to inform the citizens of the region. But we are not intending to do any of this alone. And as the Sustainable Development Goals were mentioned, SDG 17 is talking about partnership. And so the SICRI works with the member states. We work with other regional institutions like CrossQ and the international development partners to ensure that we can do this. And we're doing all of this for the people. That's the final and most important P, the human capital and resource capacity of our region. They are at the center of everything that we do at the SICRI. We have to get their buy-in when the technologies have proven to work with minimal disruptions to their lives. But most importantly, they must display the expected quality, or the transition which so desperately we need to make will be made that much harder. And with that, thank you.
And thank you as well, Sharian, for that presentation. It's very interesting to see how energy and quality kind of work hand in hand to making our region a little bit safer, a little bit safer, and a little bit more trustworthy in terms of the initiatives that we are undertaking in the area of energy, as well as the projects that we're taking in the area of quality and developing quality around the projects that are actually dealing with energy. This brings us to the end of our presentations and actually opens up the session for questions and answers. If, again, there are any questions from the audience, we will be taking those questions in the Q&A at the bottom of your screen. Feel free to drop your questions in there and we will pose them to the panelists. You can indicate to whom your question is directed, or we will pose them to both the panelists and see what discussion we can garner. But at this time, I am going to kick the ball off with a question to Fulgence, actually. Fulgence, you would have mentioned before in relation to what is happening with the development of the standard for solar PV. Perhaps you can explain to us how critical it is that the stakeholders, the general public, actually gets involved in processes such as these towards an end result that's, considers all the stakeholders and takes their positions into consideration.
Well, the standards development process is one that's inclusive. It's transparent, right? It's supposed to promote fairness, right? And so it is recommended that you include all stakeholders as wide a range as possible in the development of any proposed standard from the inception stage. So when a request is made for the development of a regional standard, the NSBs would reach out to the various stakeholders, which that would be directly impacted by that standard, yeah, and get an opinion from them. The wider public, they would just be notified via the websites, and even a statement in the local media, right, would suffice to inform other people. And so the intention here is to have buy-in, because you do not want to develop a document. People might not realize that, but standards development activity is very costly. They see it as being a voluntary exercise. However, the the experts that develop the standards have to get permission from the various organizations. And it means that the organizations are paying them, right? Part of the time, most of the time, they are involved in committees developing standards. So one could look at it as non-productive time in terms of the job description. Yeah. However, it is productive for them because then they are on the cutting edge of technology. They always in the know of what's happening, what's coming. Yeah. And so it's always important for them to participate at the technical committee level. However, once the standard have reached a particular stage, whether it be for comments or whether it be for voting, we always encourage the stakeholders to get that standard, to be in the know, to look at it, yeah, to ensure that is what that they're comfortable with it, and hence the reason is very important, very, very important for them to get hold of any draft standard out there, for whether it be for comments offer voting, but primarily at the comment stage.
Okay, so how is this process facilitated?
Okay, so the final draft standard is sent to the NSB for circulation, and the NSB can do it. They have various methods they could employ. For one, they could have a national consultation on the requirements of the standard, the final requirements on the standard. They bring in the key stakeholders, right? And of course, general interest into a room where now we know we have social distancing, we have the pandemic. So they use Zoom to engage them in terms of a town hall meeting, right? So that they can discuss, they present the elements of the standard to those persons. You could send it to individual stakeholders. So for instance, if it's a standard that would impact, for instance, the CREEBC would be sent to an architects institute, right, in the various member states. Yeah, so they engage the professionals, engineering associations, builders association. So you target those groups, right? So you get the information to them and let them respond to you, right? Consumers are very important in standards as well. Yeah, and so anywhere you have a consumer association, you send it to the consumer association. So generally, you also advertise it on your website, right? And you could always make a public announcement on a media station, media house, so that let people know that there is a standard out there for voting or comments. But we always encourage that engagement starts at the inception of the development of the standard. So when it gets to the final draft stage that we would have spoken about, the water heater standard is no surprise to the stakeholders. Yeah.
And I suppose that's why it's so critical that the SMEs are a part of the process, because inevitably the standards are developed at the regional level, implemented at the national level. Those impact businesses, those impact consumers in general. And I'm glad you brought up the issue of the cost of developing standards, because Sharianne, I suppose one of the critical things around energy and the transition to energy is always the cost. Have you seen, for example, a move by the SMEs to start getting involved in the process, or what has that been like? Has the transition actually started taking root?
That's why the transition has started to take root. And so we see not just the public sector getting involved in projects, but there is private sector interest in getting involved. We also see where, as you spoke about the standards, we're getting their buy-in into what it is that we're doing, getting their buy-in in the policies has definitely been bearing fruit. And so you see them contributing and supporting the implementation. So there definitely has been interest. The PPF has already received private sector projects, to help them to get to the point of implementation. So there definitely has been traction with the SMEs.
So sorry, if I could just come in here quickly. Standards implementation is so very important to get the buy-in from the SMEs. You see, people always believe that it's costly to implement standards, right? But they do not see the long-term benefits. So let's take again the CREEBC, right? They figure out that they might have special material that they need to put in, special conditions, and whatever the case may be. But at the end of the day, right, the investment will be realized down the road. And so you have a more resilient building in the first instance, right? You have a more resilient building, you have a more comfortable building that is a place you spend most of your time in, right? So comfort is important to you, right? Then you have, in terms of energy, right? You have a cost-effective use of energy, because the CREB speaks to implementation of an energy management, yes, and system, right? Now you may believe in instituting an energy management system might be costly, but at the end of the day, if you're using your energy efficiently, it means a reduction in your electricity bill at the end of the day, right? And so your costs of use of the building becomes less, on you as the building owner. And SMEs, all right, would realize these benefits if they are able to implement the energy efficiency standards for one, energy efficiency building code, right? And of course, like I say, renewable energies. So instead of heating their water by electric water heaters, they know they could engage buy a solar water heater that will be cost effective in terms of the use of the energy. But however, not just buying a solar water heater, but buying standardized, right, a solar water heater that meets the requisite standard, which is very important.
Yeah, I'm going to come back to that point in just a minute, but we actually have a contribution from Mario in our audience who says, "Dear panelists, I would like to emphasize the fact that the problem with dependency on fossil fuels is not the fuel itself, but the inefficiency of the combustion engine. Any combustion engine contributes more than 60% of our conversion to global warming. Exhaust gases, elevated temperatures, noise, vibrations, etc. This is the main reason to look at alternatives to convert energy in general." Comment, Sharian.
All right, so I'll begin by saying that fuel converting from one type of energy to another, so whether it's chemical to heat or chemical to mechanical or whatever it is, there are always significant amounts of inefficiencies. And so that you find across the board with any form of energy conversion. The challenge with fossil fuels, though, is not just the efficiency, but because even if you find a more efficient way to convert the fossil fuels, so for instance, you have persons who are pushing for natural gas versus oil, you see where that will still not mitigate the climate crisis that we're in. And so it's not just about the inefficiencies, but there's an environmental and dare I say the people require that we make this transition. So even if we were able to be more efficient with our use of fossil fuels, that would not be enough to make to safeguard our region. We have seen the impacts with the intensity of hurricanes, we've seen the heat waves, we've seen all of these things. So we definitely need to make a change, even if we were able to be more efficient with our use of fossil fuels.
Yeah, going back to the point again, thank you, Mario, for your intervention there, and keep the questions and the comments coming. But going back to something Fulgence mentioned, I'm wondering, how do we make sure, or how do we ensure, for example, that these small businesses, the medium-sized businesses that may not have the kind of capital that the large businesses do, actually invest in quality initiatives that at the end of the day does not cause them to go out of business in trying to recover those costs? What kind of incentives or reassurances can we actually give to the SME sector and the small business sector in relation to actually investing in the technologies that are there?
One of the things I think that needs to happen is the education of the lending institutions, right? Because it would come down to the SMEs going and borrow, you understand, to make the investment. And so if you're able to get those lending institutions to understand the value, you understand, of energy efficiency. So if a SME comes to you and say, hey, I intend to implement an energy efficiency management plan, right? You want to implement ISO 50001, yeah? And so I would require to get an auditor, right? An energy auditor. I would require to make certain changes, retrofitting, and whatever the case may be, right? If the financing institution does not understand the value of that, and they do not understand the value of an energy efficiency management system, it might become more difficult for that SME. And if it becomes more difficult for that SME, that means the SME then now have to rely on their own savings, right, to be able to make the investment, right? So I believe with an informed financial sector, in terms of the lending sector, being able to understand and the value of energy efficiency to an SME, right? What it would do down to them in the future, how they could recoup their investment. I think it would help out significantly to the SME, and they do not have to rely on their own funds to make that kind of investment. Yeah,
And
because
also like
over time the investment will pay off. Yes, go ahead. Sorry, Carrie Ann.
Go ahead, Sharia.
sorry. No, I wanted to add that with the project preparation facility that's being implemented by the SICRI, we are partnering with the CDF, their credit risk abatement facility, that will help to mitigate some of this risk that the financial institutions are afraid, I use that word, to take on. So while we educate them so they understand the value in energy efficiency and renewable energy projects, we also are providing that opportunity to manage some of that risk, so that financial institutions will be more inclined to get involved in energy projects.
Okay, so what has that dialogue been like, Sharian? Are the financial institutions actually feeling a little bit more secured about the direction that we're trying to go in terms of energy, or is there still the same hesitance that they would have been before?
I know the dialogue has been going very well, and we see the interest in developing financing instruments, particularly for energy across the region. So we're hopeful that we will see more concrete products coming out specifically for energy, so that it will not be such a struggle for our SMEs to implement and buy into these projects. Yeah.
Okay. I know one of the areas that we are pretty much engaging with SMEs now is the CARICOM energy efficiency labeling scheme that we're trying to implement in the 4 countries, Belize, St. Lucia, Jamaica, Trinidad, and Tobago. And we would have seen where in some countries we would have had extreme interest by the private sector in terms of we are volunteering to pilot with you, we are volunteering to go this route with you. Fulgence, what do you think that we need to do to help businesses feel a little bit more secured about joining this scheme, about coming on board in the countries that are actually piloting, to see how they can assist and how they can move this trajectory along in terms of making sure that our appliances or lights, refrigeration, air conditioning coming into the region is actually efficient?
Okay, I think really it is about our communication strategy, being able to communicate effectively, right? And so that they would understand. I also believe that coming out of the pilot, being able to indicate successes, right, of the piloting scheme. And so you indicate to them, hey, we piloted in these countries and these are the successes, right? The stakeholders have bought into it, and there is a real change in purchasing equipment, right? Refrigerators, air conditioners, and lighting. There's a marked difference, in consumers purchasing these equipment. People are purchasing efficient equipment. So we present to them, a package. Of course, it must be underpinned by a strong communication plan, right? You must communicate marketing and information, right? Communicate that to them, and so that they understand and make them buy in, right? It's buying in at the end of the day.
Okay, thanks for that. I'm checking to see if there are any questions coming in. Sharian, you would have mentioned earlier about the Energy Knowledge Hub. What has the response been like to that? Have you had, for example, regional organizations joining in and actually sharing information? Because I know one of the challenges we always have in our region is that sharing of information and the holding on to information by various agencies. Have we seen a change in that to facilitate some of the transitions that we need to happen in terms of energy, and also to facilitate, for example, academic institutions and they're being able to have access to some of these resources within our region?
Thanks, Azoya. We are working on that, in terms of information sharing. I think slowly organizations are seeing the benefit of having to, and of reaching out to each other and working together. And so we are not there yet, but we are definitely getting there in terms of partnerships for data and information sharing. And what is important is that we can show them what it is that we do with this data, so they can see the benefits of it, and so they can understand the value in sharing even more. So it's important that we're able to communicate that when we have the data, we can inform policy. When we have the data, we can be able to allow encourage the legislations and regulations to be in place. When we have the data, we can get additional funding, for the region. So it's very important that we communicate those benefits so that we can encourage those who are not yet on board to join us in sharing the data, in using the data, because making informed decisions is definitely, the best way for us to go. And I'll go back to the example I shared with the solar water heaters. The company, they just identified a solar brand, and they bought it. No testing, they didn't have the data. So being able to make those informed decisions for yourselves, from a regional standpoint, all the way down to the end user, the consumers, it's definitely important that we have that data and we share that data so that we can all benefit.
Yeah, and I suppose one of the interesting, or at least one of the important things to note here is that within the context of what we are doing with the labeling scheme, we're actually trying to also create a database where that information will be stored, where countries that are part of the scheme will actually have access to that data, so that you know what appliances have been tested, what the results are, where they lie in terms of efficiency, and that information will be represented on the labels as well. So that's one of the things our audience can look out for in the future. One other thing is also our upcoming webinar on the Quebec, the CREBC building code. We actually have 3 town halls that we are running back to back from the 15th of this month, 15th of June, until the 17th of June. And what we've been doing, because we would have said earlier what we've been doing in relation to training for the code, what we are now going to do is actually break that code down for the layman. So if you're interested in what is coming or what is in this energy efficiency building code that you keep hearing about, stay tuned to our social media as well as Secret's social media for updates in terms of what we'll be doing with relation to the Quebec, because we'll be breaking it down into residential implications. If you're a homeowner, or you want to be a homeowner, you're building, what are the things that you need to consider in relation to building efficiently? Then we'll look at the businesses. If you're in the commercial sector, what are the things that you need to consider? And then we'll be looking at the ASHRAE compliance in relation to the energy efficiency building code. So we're having 3 back-to-back town halls, 15th, 16th, 17th of this month, in relation to those to the code and those compliance paths and areas for implementation and considerations for implementation of that code in coming weeks, actually about 2 weeks from now. I see 2 questions from our audience. The first is from Jonathan Platt, who asks, voluntary implementation may be an initial approach, as each member state may be at different levels with regard to their legislation, which will make implementation of the Quebec mandatory. Could this lack of enforcement be a gap in our region that needs to be closed? Could there be another driver, such as the financial institutions and insurance? Fulgence, your mic is muted still.
Thanks, Jonathan, for that. Yes, it can be. However, we are looking at that, and hence the reason we're targeting the financial institutions as well. Right. And I would have mentioned earlier that you need to target those financial institutions to be able to encourage the funding, right, to be able to implement those initiatives. Okay. And so I don't believe that legislation is always a way to go. Right. I know we in the Caribbean, we think that we need to have the big stick and the police on our back to comply, right? But we could always coerce compliance, yeah, with an informed society, right? An informed population. They can drive, right, implementation of various standards. And the financial institutions are no different. Okay, if we say, hi, hey, you come to me for a construction of a home, and I would like you to consider, right, making it energy efficient, implement the requirements of the building code, right? And if you're gonna show me that you're gonna do it, and you would have taken that into consideration, we will gladly fund, yeah, your construction of your home. Right, so that's the kind of education we want to put out there for the financial institutions, not just the financial institutions, but the insurance companies as well. Right, if your home is built to the energy efficiency billing code, you get a 10% discount on your premium, yeah, something like that, right? And with the financial institution, maybe you could get a reduction in the interest rate of your loan, of your mortgage. Right, so these kind of incentives we believe are important, together with an informed consumer, informed population, to make those changes and to let you drive the market really into compliance.
Yeah, good points. Good points. Any comments, Sharian, in relation to that, or?
No, I think
he dealt very well. And Jonathan is agreeing with you, Fulgence. We
Thanks.
have another contribution which says, in terms of the energy labels and specifically the underlying testing standards, do your regional or national entities tend to adopt standards from ISO, the EU, the US, or anywhere else? If yes, do you have representation in those groups?
Okay, so yes, you have member states adopting international standards, and I would have indicated that now, even in the development of regional standards, we're looking to see how best we could adopt international standards, because that's the way to go, right? We do have member states having representation in the ISO, in the IEC, specifically IEC, right? The IEC has a program, affiliate member country program, where member states can actually adopt up to 200 standards, IEC standards, right? Which would, of course, they would have access to energy efficiency standards and various electrical standards. And if they adopt 75% of that, then they have a further 400 standards that they could adopt, right? Free of charge. So yes, the member states are taking advantage of that, and they are participating internationally in the development of international standards. What we're doing at the regional level is being able to coordinate that participation, because you have certain member states who are not members or full members of the ISO, all right? And so if we could get their comments, and we could get a member state who is a member, right, a full member of the ISO or subscriber member, they would be able to posit, right, the comments of that other member states into that committee and be able to get that address. Okay, so we have that kind of coordination going on. Okay, yeah, so we do encourage the participation into international organizations, and quite a number of them have MOUs with the ASTM, right, where they could participate directly in the standards development of ASTM.
Okay, thank you very much for that. And that was our last live question, and we're now on 11:30. So I'm actually going to ask both our panelists to offer final remarks before we close this session. Starting with you, Fulgence.
Thank you, Latoya. Once again, let me just thank the CrossQ Secretariat, the Energy team, for affording me the opportunity to be part of this webinar. I only hope that we were able to pass the necessary information on to our participants on the webinar. And please do look out for standards in energy for the energy sector when they are circulated, whether it be for comments or be for voting. Your inputs into those standards are vital. Contact your national standards bureaus, right? Find out what's happening, find out those professionals out there, find out how you could assist in the development of those standards. Let your organization, your professional organizations be part of the conversation. Yeah, because inclusivity for standards development is critical for buy-in moving forward. Thank you.
Sorry, final remarks, Sharian, go ahead.
I just want to underscore that we work together as a region. That's the best opportunity that we have to facilitate the energy revolution. And so adopting the standards are important. Contributing to the standards development is definitely important. And so I encourage everyone who is participating here to go get some more information on what those standards are for the energy sector and start utilizing them. Don't wait until, as Fulgent said, don't wait on the legislation to say that you have to do it. You can already derive benefits in terms of savings, in terms of increased comfort. When you look at the building code, there are many things that are you can benefit. So even if it's just from a personal standpoint, there are opportunities for you to take advantage of these standards, to have them implemented in your companies, in your homes, and allow us together as a region to continue to champion that cause for this transition, because it is necessary and we need to do it well the first time.
Thank you very much for those words. And thank you once again, both Mr. Fulgent Saint-Prix, our technical officer responsible for standards development and technical regulations with the CrossQ Secretariat, and Ms. Sharian Ferguson, energy expert with the CICRE, the Caribbean Center for Renewable Energy and Energy Efficiency. And I want to end by saying a special thanks to those who would have posed questions, as well as thanks to all of you who would have come today to hear what we have to say, to learn a little bit about what our mandate entails, and to also hear why we are actually adding quality parameters to the energy sector within our region, and how vital that process is, and also how critical it is for your role to actually be involved in the standards development process to make sure that your concerns are heard, your points are noted, and that you're also informed in terms of what is happening within our region. I'd like to say thank you to Mr. Mohan Nandwani, our finance manager and head of operations at the CrossQ Secretariat, who sat in on behalf of our CEO, Mr. Derek Omar. Thank you for the opening remarks, Mohan. And a final thank you to the energy team who's in the background, always making sure that everything is running, prompting when time is up. Thank you, ladies in the background. And thank you as well to the TAPSEC project, without whom this would not have been possible, because in addition to these webinars, they're also facilitating the development of several aspects of our energy portfolio, and also giving support in terms of the development and implementation of our regional energy efficiency building code, and providing support for the energy efficiency labeling scheme as well. So, and behind the TAPSET unit, we have the European Union, German Corporation, and the GIZ, who would have been lending their financial assistance. So, and then behind them as well is the CARICOM Energy Unit, who's always there to assist and to direct and to add their 2 cents worth. So thank you everyone for having been here today. If you still have questions, please feel free to drop us a note. You can send us an email at crossq.caricom@crossq.org. That's crosq.caricom@crossq.org. You can also visit our energy page, energy.crossq.org, and you can find resources there and other information about what we are doing in relation to the energy efficiency building scheme, the energy efficiency building code, the energy efficiency labeling scheme, and other initiatives that will be coming on board. And we'll try to keep it as updated as possible in terms of what is also happening in relation to standards development. So at this time, I will hand over to Master Control for our extra. So thank you all very much.
See labels, read the labels, read the labels carefully. You will see they are the key to energy efficiency. You must read the labels when you're shopping for a fridge. These labels you cannot miss on LED bulbs and CFLs. You'll find them on ACs as well.
The new CARICOM energy efficiency labels will help you make better decisions on electrical items you purchase. They show you how much energy is used by each product so that you can save money and electricity in your homes and businesses. Look out for the labels on refrigerators, AC units, and light bulbs. To learn more about these new labels, visit energy.crosq.org.
See labels, read the labels, read the labels carefully. You will see they are the key to energy efficiency. You must read the labels.
The CARICOM Regional Energy Efficiency Building Code was developed to help property developers increase the energy efficiency and the upgradability of their building projects. Energy savings help offset the potential higher cost of building your home to code. And enhanced upgradability helps commercial owners increase their competitive advantage, saving money over time. Additionally, lower energy demands during and after the building process can also lead to community and national level benefits like reduced reliance on fossil fuel generated electricity across the construction industry and in homes, lower national fuel import bills, which can free up funding for other critical areas of investment, and fewer greenhouse gas emissions. So do the maths, play the long game, and help build towards a better future today. For more information on the CARICOM Regional Energy Efficiency Building Code, visit energy.crosq.org.
Goodbye, everyone, and have a great week.